Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound.
We're not really sure what Steve's
The crack is? It's fine.
are, so
He's on route.
It's great. We're recorded, so we'll crack on.
he's on his route.
Sure.
Coming in, yeah. No, he's on his way. They were down at St Patrick's Centre.
That's a slide now.
Okay.
Good place to be. Okay, so members, welcome to the 78th meeting of the Committee for Finance in the 22 to 27 mandate. Usual rules apply around phones. If you are in the gallery or indeed you're a member of the committee. We have no apologies yet. We have a couple of members who are late joining, so we're kind of relatively tight on quorum, but hopefully we'll have other members join us. We have a couple of members, one so far and perhaps more to come, joining on Zoom. Agenda item 2 is declaration of interest. Does anyone have an interest they wish to declare? Deputy Chair.
Yeah, my dad's a councillor in Newry Morning District Council.
Great, okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, Chairperson's Business. There's a few pieces of Chairperson's Business to go through. I'll just start with the first one, which relates to the Treasury allocations of £17 million in Ardell for support in relation to home heating oil, number one, and 81 million in Amy, which has been the subject of some debate, I think it's fair to say. Now, we asked, following last week's meeting, we asked the department for clarity on the 81 million Amy. There's obviously been an Economy Committee hearing on this subsequently. Subsequent to that, so we have not yet had a response from the department on the status of the 81 million. There was obviously a back and forward at the Economy Committee, which people may have seen. There was a session, an emergency session with the Minister, where this was discussed. I am keen that we chase the department and get more. I think given the topicality and urgency of this issue, we should have heard by now the status of the 81 million from their perspective. But I think subsequent to that, we've heard from the Secretary of State that his view, or he has been told, or he is telling, I don't know what it is, he is saying that his position, or the UK government's position, seems to be that this 81 million can be used for a scheme that could relate to home heating oil. He appeared to say that to the media the other night. I would like clarity on that, both from the UK government and from the Department of Finance, because I think this is just a completely suboptimal situation where we don't have clarity about how this 81 million Amy can be used. So I would like clarity on how and whether it can be used, and what conversations have happened, both from the Finance Department, further to what we've already asked for in relation to the 81 million Amy that was first scored in the Treasury in the budget last autumn, and also in relation to what the Secretary of State has said, that he thinks there could be flexibility, i.e. the 81 million could be used for home heating oil. So is that being used to design one whole package, including what I presume this might be difficult to do because you would have 17 million in Dell and 81 million in Amy, but if members are content, I think we should get urged clarity on both of those things from the department and the NIO. We're bringing the Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think definitely we need to get the clarity, and this is where, whenever it's a financial thing that's coming through, you would expect it to be coming through and us getting notification from the Finance Minister, but practically the way that it's been announced has led to a bit of confusion this morning in the Economy Committee. The utility regulator was in, and they seemed very much of the view that they're working the two numbers together, as the Secretary of State said in the press, that the total is now 98 million, and the most likely way to apply it would be at source, due to the lack of data on homes heated by oil here. So that had come up there, but I think when it comes to actual application of funding, it's a reasonable expectation that notification would have came from the Treasury to the Finance Minister, and we should have been let know what the terms are around that.
Yeah, I think it's really suboptimal. We're in a situation where we're asking kind of post hoc and in the middle of an urgent crisis for people who are on oil, and there's political spat going on in the executive, but it's not clear what exactly is being designed and how it can be designed. So I think urgent clarity, and I would have liked to have gotten it by now, frankly, and I would have liked to have gotten an answer to what I assume would have been a straightforward question about the 81 million and the classification of the AME. So I think we should have got that by now, but I would like to express to the department the urgency that we as the Finance Committee hear about it, because we haven't heard, I'm not sure we've had any official communication from the department about the status of this 81 million. Members are content that we get that urgently. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next that the chairperson business members relates to it's a written statement and notification from the Minister on the Northern Ireland Consolidated Fund. The Minister has provided, that's page 6 and 7 of the meeting pack, the Minister has provided notification and a copy of a written statement concerning a cash advance to the Education Department from the Consolidated Fund. It is for a maximum of £156 million. Once the budget bill is passed and receives royal assent, the advances will be repaid. So it's not entirely clear from the correspondence that we have what is it for pay, or is it?
It doesn't give us an indication of that, Chair, so we can seek greater clarification.
I think given we are asking, this is part of the Administrative Financial Provisions Bill, I think we should ask what the additional £156 million is actually for, so that we have a better understanding of how these advances are used and whether, and any other conclusions we need to draw from that. I think it would be helpful for us to know. I assume it's pay. It would be the most obvious explanation. I'm just going to, yes, Deputy Chair.
Are you talking just about the advance?
The advance,
application
yeah.
of it. My understanding is that the budget bill just didn't include the application of that, and this is just the formality until the new budget bill, including the reallocation of the monies received under the 400 million, actually gets royal assent. So the previous budget bill just gave the authority to spend. So there's actually no authority to spend the 400 million in this year. So this is an advance until that budget bill actually gets royal assent. That's my understanding of it.
The budget bill did not contain authorisation to spend the reserve claim money, is that right?
It does, but it hasn't received a royal assent. It only passed in the House.
That's helpful to know. If the department could just clarify that factually, the Deputy Chair may be right, and if she could just clarify that, they could clarify that, would be helpful. Okay, 3.2, correspondence from the Speaker to the Minister of Finance re the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill. That's page 8 of the meeting pack. The Speaker has confirmed to the Finance Minister that he is satisfied that the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill is within the legislative competence of the Assembly. Bill was introduced on 16th of March, and second stage will take place on the 20th of April. We will then have an oral briefing with officials on the 22nd. So there's an additional area of civil law which I just wanted to raise as a matter of chairperson's business, but less really to draw to the committee's attention in plenary on Monday at Finance Questions. The Finance Minister made some remarks about judicial remarks which were, to my ear, quite pointed. He said that, and we don't want to misquote him here, I'm going to just quote it correctly. He said, this is in relation to a judgment. He was asked a question about by Stephen Dunn, MLA, and he responded to say that this is the judge who had said there had been an unacceptable and gaslighting approach from two different executive departments. Mr. O'Dowd said, rather than making personal comments to the judiciary, should keep their comments to legal rulings. I would just like to clarify in my MLA capacity with the Finance Minister whether that has any touches on his responsibility for the civil law. I just think those remarks are quite interesting about a judge, so I will be writing in a personal capacity. I just wanted to put that on the record, given I also chair this committee. I'll be writing to the Finance Minister to raise that, because I do think it's worth clarifying, given the judge's ruling on a matter of civil law. Okay, so we'll go on, members, to agenda item 4, which is draft minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March 2026. That's at page 28 of the meeting pack. So, members, are we content that the minutes at page 28 are a true reflection of the proceedings held on the 11th of March 2026? Content? Yep. Okay, agenda item 5, matters arising. 5.1 is correspondence from the House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee to the Financial Secretary of the Treasury. That's at page 45 of the meeting pack. The House of Lords NI Scrutiny Committee has written to the Financial Secretary of the Treasury regarding the removal of duty relief exemption on small parcels entering the NI, entering the EU and Northern Ireland from the 1st of July 2026, and EU proposals around a handling fee from November 26. We have been copied into the correspondence as a courtesy. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is something that our party has raised continuously with a lot of concern, and I wonder, as this is quite significant and it is quite imminent in coming in, should there be some sort of engagement or action through the Department of Finance to advise people as to what is coming their way, what it's going to mean for people, because this is just going to suddenly apply?
Well, I think so. My understanding is that from the correspondence back from Lord Livermore, is that the UK government hasn't actually made if I'm understanding it correctly, it hasn't actually finalised how it intends to handle or approach this. So I think it may be, I'm not sure the Finance Department would be the correct department in the first place. I think.
Well, could we ask a question, Chair, as to what exactly has happened on this and what is happening?
Yeah, I mean, we are copied into it as a courtesy, and it isn't directly our responsibility. However, I am happy to write to or to flag to the Finance Department and ask if they have arrived at a view, and they may redirect us to a different department, but I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so 5.2 is, sorry, Brian Kingston.
No, I just want to speak on that. I mean, quite frankly, it's outrageous. You know, the thought that a €3 charge on every single item, plus a €2 handling fee, you know, it is absolutely outrageous if the EU thinks they can impose that. Now, it's not clear will it apply on all goods coming from GB, if it's up to the supplier to register themselves, but I'm aware over 100 retailers have already stopped supplying Northern Ireland, you know, so we definitely need to get clarity on this, because it is outrageous that you would try to impose that tax on people purchasing things online in Northern Ireland.
I'm happy to get clarity from the department. I mean, I say a couple of things. Number one, I don't think it is the purview of the Finance Department. I'm happy for people to put their views on the record and for us to ask the Finance Department if they have a view or if another executive department is looking at it. I would imagine it primarily would fall to the First and Deputy First Minister's office, given they have primary responsibility for EU relations, and they may or may not have come to a collective view. I think they have found it difficult to come to a collective view on EU-related matters. I would just say, in parenthesis, there are any number of very difficult and unpleasant consequences from Brexit, and the committee would be here until about midnight tonight were we to be listing them all. But nevertheless, people have put their views on the record. 5.2 is from the Assembly Business Office, and it relates to departmental minutes on contingent liabilities. So that's at page 47 of the meeting pack. The Assembly Business Office has drawn the committee's attention and that of the Health and Public Accounts Committees to a departmental minute on a contingent liability and some procedural issues which arise. The minute presented on the 12th of March 26 informs the Assembly of the proposal for an indemnity in relation to a Centre for Digital Healthcare. A Centre for Digital Healthcare Technology City Deal collaboration between Belfast Health and Social Care Trust and Ulster University. Managing public money guidance states that such a minute must be presented if a government department proposes to undertake a contingent liability in excess of £300,000 for which there is no specific statutory authority. This minute is copied to the relevant departmental committee and to the PAC. The guidance also provides that contingent liability should not go live until 14 working days after the minute has been presented. If a member of the Assembly or Committee objects in line with existing Assembly procedures, the guarantee or indemnity should be withheld pending examination of the objection. The Business Office has highlighted that there are currently no defined or agreed Assembly procedures in place for MLAs to signify their objection to this liability. It is only those members of the relevant departmental committee which will be aware of such a situation arising. In this particular case, any Health Committee member or PAC member can lodge their objection by contacting the Health Department private office. However, this committee has also been alerted by the Assembly Business Office to an apparent lack of defined Assembly procedures and the potential gap in scrutiny by all MLAs. We were informed of this position previously when the committee clerk met with Joanne McBurney, who's a senior Department of Finance official, as we know, to discuss it. It's worth us just, talking this through for a second. So the clerk may be able to advise the standing orders provide that any MLA is entitled to object to a contingent liability being agreed, but it isn't clear how an MLA objects to a contingent liability being agreed.
The current guidelines don't set out a procedure. Members will be aware that we have procedures for a lot of things that members can raise issues and objections to. For this, we don't. The conversation previously that I had with Joanne McBurney was around specifically around that not all departments were actually following this process from their side. They weren't necessarily laying the appropriate memo, they weren't necessarily highlighting it to the relevant committee, and they weren't necessarily looking to respect the 14-day period that members have to object to it. Where this goes is suggesting that this committee and potentially PAC might like to look at some kind of procedure in the Assembly. I think, to be honest, Chair, that probably goes a little beyond the Finance Committee's remit. However, with there being no procedure, this will continue to work as it has done, where we now have notifications because of the discussion I had with Joanne. However, there is no official process set down for an objection. Therefore, an objection can be raised with the Business Office, but there isn't a specific process or procedure for that. So it doesn't necessarily mean then that the liability is referred to a debate in the chamber or anything like that, much as you would get with a piece of delegated legislation that was affirmative. So it's whether or not the committee has a view on this, whether or not the committee wants to do something about it, or whether it's a case potentially of looking at whether or not there might be something for the Procedures Committee to look at here.
I think probably it does matter, the Procedures Committee probably, because this obviously specifically is a contingent liability, which is obviously a finance issue, but I think it probably is a Procedures Committee matter. If members are content that we flag it to the Procedures Committee, that's not to say that we shouldn't be getting notifications as the Finance Committee of each contingent liability, but rather to decide on what is they may want to look at this and they may take evidence or seek our view on it at some point. Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, as the clerk says, the fact that it's been alerted shows good transparency. And I think with this one, whenever it is the one that's over that threshold in value, it just hits that wee bit different level of the threshold in terms of the Treasury Officer accounts and the guidance. But I think that now that we're coming to the end of the financial year, every single departmental set of accounts will be disclosing all their provisions and contingent liabilities, and we'll obviously be looking at those that come through in the Department of Finance. And I know we've looked at some of those before in closed sessions, so I would expect that every committee will be looking at all of their contingent liabilities that are under the threshold and over it, but just it's good that it has flagged as a matter of procedure.
Chair, I wonder if the committee would consider potentially issuing a memo to other stat committees just to highlight where we are on the budget cycle and the fact that contingent liabilities will be something that will need a level of scrutiny. It's one of those things, it's perhaps a little bit more esoteric than a lot of the budget issues that committees deal with, and it does maybe take a little bit more explaining than other issues. So if members were minded, then we could look to inform other committees that these are one of the things that they should be looking for.
Yeah, I think that's sensible, but I also think we should be sending it to the Procedures Committee to flag this amendment.
So okay. Two things there to do. Members agreed.
Okay, members content. Thank you. Right, now I'm going to move into the tabled pack. We'll have Dallo extracts. First is 5.4, which is the readout response relating to the Local Growth Fund. The committee asked the Department for the latest position in relation to the Minister's engagement and discussions around the Local Growth Fund. They have provided the committee has provided has provided a timeline about updating on latest actions, including the Minister's engagement with various parties regarding the Local Growth Fund from the 22nd of January up until the 5th of March 2026. So, members, I open this up for comments. We are in a bit of a standoff here. Clearly, there's kind of unanimity that people are not comfortable with, happy with the capital resource split, which is kind of imposed by this this Whitehall Department, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. But we are in a situation where basically in less than a fortnight, people who are on protected notice will be let go. That will be a crisis in certain parts of our world. And to be honest, the executive, whether we like it or not, will have to pick up the pieces, because some of the people who are forced out of economic and activity programmes are going to become, it'll either be, they're either, we all know the negative consequences they could, that could arise from that, which could add additional cost. I'm sort of personally frustrated that essentially kind of no one's really taking responsibility for this, and I've heard that repeatedly from the community and voluntary sector, who feel that the UK government has kind of washed its hands and kind of said, computer said no, and the executive is now saying, well, we can't do anything about it. And I just think it's a deeply frustrating situation for the community and voluntary sector to be in this situation. It feels, to be honest, like responsibility shifting all round. But that's my view. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in. No.
I mean, the responsibilities with Westminster and the department, it's their programme. They make the decisions. It's there in terms of the policy. That rests with them. And I'm conscious, I mean, of course you would want to do something, but where does the funding come from? And the policy split is decided by Westminster, not by here. And I mean, I know the Finance Minister said, and indeed he said it in the Chamber on Monday, that, you know, the executive collectively have written to them. And I just think we need to keep the pressure on to try and get a response. Because I do agree, I mean, people have been put on notice. They've been put on notice the last 3 months almost. And I don't think it is acceptable that department is treating them this way. But I think we need to keep the pressure on where it needs to be in terms of those that have this policy responsibility, but also in terms of the resourcing around this, because they could make a different decision very quickly and allow money to flow. And for whatever reason, they're just refusing to do so.
I'm going to Jay Carroll. Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree on the point made by Deirdre about, you know, the main culprit here is the British government, but I think we need to have a dual approach, because if they're kind of burying their head in the sands and not budging, and then it's no good for the executive just to kind of shrug their shoulders and say there's nothing we could do. So I think we should be writing to the Minister to see if there's any emergency provision that he can supply. I mean, I'll note that if you take a proportion of industrial de-rating that goes to the large companies here, it's around £15 million or so. That could be repurposed to support the community and voluntary sector. So there is some funds available despite, you know, overall restrictions. So I think a dual approach is needed. Otherwise, we risk, you know, organisations going to the wall. So I would be in favour of contacting the Minister to see what emergency action he's putting in place and finance to make sure these organisations and people don't lose their jobs. So I'd be supportive of that approach.
Bring in Owen Tennyson.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, to say, like, the response of the Secretary of State, in particular at the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, was gaslighting and shows complete contempt for the local assembly and the executive, given the concerns that have been raised. And I think it's important to highlight for the public that what we're asking for isn't more money. This isn't a bacon bowl situation. It's simply the profile of that money to support the organisations. So it's not an unreasonable request that's being made. I know that I'm sure all colleagues in all parties would have raised this directly with the Prime Minister when he was here last week. Yeah. I think we need to continue to push at that. I sympathise entirely with the point that Deirdre has made, though, around the executive is currently overdrawn. So the idea that there's lots of money floating around to do something it doesn't stand up, and we should be cautious about raising people's expectations, though I would be happy to write to the Finance Minister just to ask what kind of work is ongoing to look at options there. But I think we do have to be really honest with people and manage the expectations that there isn't a lot of money floating around in the executive at the moment to do something in this space.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, thank you. And I know last week we had spoke about this and talked about how it has been raised at every level. And, you know, as Owen said in meetings with the Prime Minister last week, I know the Deputy First Minister had handed over a letter again. It's been raised at every level. And last week we had talked about, you know, potentially joining up with other jurisdictions for other finance committees to take a view, just to try to think of coming at it from any particular angle.
I think we can probably basically now update and say that is not going to be possible because they're both in Purdah.
Stood down.
That's the next item.
While they haven't reached the end of their mandates yet, but both committees have ceased to meet because they've stood down the business. Neither had looked at the local growth fund, so there is an item in the next item in the pack is a report done by the Welsh Economy, Trade and Rural Affairs Committee, but neither Finance Committee and those jurisdictions actually dealt with this. So that joint letter would be possible.
Okay. members, I think in the seriousness of the issue, like first of all, there is kind of, I think, cross-party agreement that the imposition of this arbitrary and kind of designed for basically parts of the north of England split between capital and resource is just, is slightly kind of self-defeating and bizarre and arbitrary. And yes, certainly I was in our meeting with the Prime Minister and we raised it and made those points. I would suggest two things. I think Jerry's right that a dual-pronged approach is correct, because no matter who is initially or primarily responsible, the outcome is one that our constituents and these organisations are going to have to deal with. So we will have to take responsibility as a collective assembly and as an executive for the consequences, whether we were primarily responsible or not. So I do think writing to the UK government, we all have an outstanding letter out. So we had a letter to the NIO which was redirected to MHCLG. I assume they don't have anybody watching today's committee hearing, but if they do, maybe they do, who knows, we would reiterate that we want, and I think should expect, and I think based on everything we've established before about devolution guidance notes and how they should be treating us with respect, this is an urgent situation for our for devolved government and for the community and voluntary sector in Northern Ireland and the provision of employment support for the vulnerable. So I think we can kind of write with, as it were, extreme prejudice to ask for a response ASAP. I do think we should also write either to the Finance Minister or to the Finance and other Ministers, Communities Economy, collectively, or copy it to the to other ministers and say, what is the contingency plan? Is there a contingency plan? I don't think that's an unreasonable question to ask. I don't think it's trying to stick the executive with blame, but the consequences will have to be dealt with. We know that there's going to have to be a plan for 27, 28 onwards, and I think the public would expect, even whenever decisions are made elsewhere, we have to take responsibility for the outcome in terms of ameliorating it. It's also worth just saying, parenthetically, the executive did save £30 million whenever EU match funding ended, and I personally have never had a satisfactory answer as to what happened to the 30 million that the executive saved. It may have just gone on, and actually there wasn't an executive in place, I think, at that time, I'm right in saying. It may simply have gone on to dealing with other inflationary pay pressures, but it is true to say that the executive at one point did fund this stuff, only not even a handful of years ago. So it's not unreasonable for us to ask what the contingency plan is, acknowledging that the primary responsibility for the split is, of course, with the UK government. So if members are content, we will send those letters, and I think it is at least important that the community and voluntary sector see us understanding the urgency for them, even if we can't give them the answer that they want, that we would all like, which is deeply frustrating. Okay, if we're content with that? Yeah. We'll now move on to, we've covered the Welsh Committee. They're basically in Purda now, they've broken up for their elections. They're not in Purda, sorry.
They spoke up, but the report that's in the pack, Chair, it sets out exactly the same concerns that members have.
And I think it would be worth us maybe mentioning that to the MHCLG in our letter and just say, look, this is a... Okay. So 5.6, Communities Committee, Children's Services Cooperation Act, 2015, which is a legislation passed a decade ago. Following a recent oral evidence session with DOF and DFC officials, the Communities Committee agreed to write the Department of Finance to inquire about its interactions on the use of single pool budgets for better outcomes for children and young people. We've copied in his correspondence and we'll get to see the response likewise. I think that's useful to see that correspondence. Maybe just a comment on that. No. 5.7 is a news article in today's Irish News about something we discussed briefly last week, but we didn't get the detail. The Irish News has more detail than us. Perhaps that's not a completely unsurprising thing, maybe. Anyway, about what is called in the paper a secret Forest Park Trail alternative, which apparently will link Slieve Gullion to the Mourns as an alternative to the, shall we say, ill-fated gondola scheme, which we've talked about at some length in this committee. This is obviously a big part of the Newry Morning Down part of the Belfast region city deal. It's not clear where this information's come from. Someone maybe has given it or sent it or leaked it or whatever to the Irish News. I think we want to keep on top of the detail because we've expressed an interest, and no other committee is keeping on top of all the detail of the Belfast region city deal. I haven't got the detail of whether this trail, so I'm not going to express a view on whether this trail is a good or bad idea. I'm sure it has merit, and it's a beautiful part of the world, but I'll bring in Deputy Chair who may have a local perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that given that the city deals as part of the Department of Finance and we had heard evidence from them in the past, I think that it is really important that we get some information from them as to what they're doing here. We're now almost a year on from whenever the lead partner, the local council, having spent about £1 million worth in consultancy, had their first plan stopped. We're looking into another plan. Thank goodness Minister Muir spoke up quickly so that more time and money wasn't wasted looking around at the second alternative that didn't go ahead. And that was last summer. So now we're sitting in March, and it would appear from the information that has been circulating between these groups locally that a concept has been agreed in principle with the Department of Finance City Deal Board with no business case. So there's still no business case. No idea will it even be a significant enough tourism attraction to meet the wow factor of what the city deals requires. So to have bounced that back, I'm going to be hitting into a few more months as the clock runs down as to whether this £30 million will ever reach tourism in Northern Ireland, never mind the Mournes area. It looks very unlikely to me. It's very disappointing. And I just think that whenever the city deals sat with the Department of Finance and we heard from them before, it would be good if we could ask them directly what has happened. Have you just approved a concept without a business case? What's going to happen? And obviously from that local perspective, you know, is there going to be another £1 million of ratepayers' money spent on more consultancy here and then nothing actually come off it?
I think it is important given the interest the committee has expressed in it. So yes, I'm happy to ask the department for a practical update. Jerry Carroll?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, not in my constituency, but interesting reading the story this morning. Can we also follow on from the Deputy Chair's point, find out sort of what organisations have been involved in discussions already, presumably the Council and any other organisations, and also given the fact that it's a proposed trail and a nature resort, if not in a mountainous area, like what kind of environmentally protected sort of due diligence was done beforehand. If we can find out that stuff as well, I think it would be really important and useful also. Thanks.
I think those are certainly important questions. I presume in answering our question, they will indicate to us what stage this concept is, and we can then we will then know. Like I presume if it's just a concept, they won't have done anything like an environmental impact assessment because they won't be anywhere near that stage. If this is just something that's been discussed in private, but I think we need to get an answer first of all to the question: what is the status of this, and when will it be a formal proposal? If we're happy, and I think those are pertinent questions that we can ensure are asked subsequent to that. Members are content? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Excuse me. Agenda item 6 is SL1, Government Resources and Accounts Northern Ireland Act 2001, Estimates and Accounts Designation of Bodies Order 2025, or GRANI, as the ANARACs call it. Members, the SL1 today's pack is subject to the new delegated legislation process that was introduced on the 5th of January. The purpose of this statutory rule is to officially list certain public bodies whose spending must be included in government departments' budgets and financial accounts. There was a similar SL1 on the 26th of November last year, with the aim of this is the same, to add a new body to the list of designated bodies. In this case, it's the Northern Ireland Climate Commissioner, so this is just a routine. Every time a new body is created, they have to be added to this so they're subject to the same accountancy, effectively, the reporting requirements. So members, if we're agreed that we will issue a call for call for views on the SL1, which is part of the new delegated legislation process. A call for views on the SL1, publishing the SL1 and the draft SR and relevant documents in the department on the committee website. Are we content with that? Yes. And we will seek any information on any matters raised during SL1 stage. That's any matters raised with us or matters raised during this effective consultation process. It's not a formal. It's a call for views by the committee rather than it's not a departmental consultation, including via the survey from the Department of Finance itself, and to publish any responses after they've been considered by the committee. Are we agreed to all of that? Members, you're not going to ask to make a decision today about the policy merits of this proposed statutory rule. And to be clear, I know people may have views about the Climate Commissioner, but this isn't about. This is about making sure the Climate Commissioner just is added to a piece of legislation around its accounts. So, members, there is a set of documents on this beginning at page 52 of the meeting pack, which includes a clerk's memo of the government resources and accounts. It is just quicker to say granny, I'm afraid, even though it sounds silly. The Government Resource and Accounts Northern Ireland Act 2001, an SL1 letter from the Department at page 54, draft statutory rule page 58, an explanatory memorandum at page 66. So, members, are we agreed to note receipt of the SL1 proposed statutory rule and indeed all the other things that we talked about earlier on that we were going to publish at the week, and to consider the SL1 formally on the 15th of April, and are members content that we do not seek a briefing, because, to be clear, this is simply about adding to a list of designated bodies for accountancy purposes. Agreed? Yes? Yep. So now, members, we're going to go through the next two agenda items together in the interest of expediency. Agenda item 7 is the SR 2026-30, the Deaths and Stillbirth Signing of Certificates Regulations Northern Ireland 2026, and agenda item 8, C1, the Death, Stillbirths and Baby Loss Commencement Order Northern Ireland 2026. The Department has formally laid a statutory rule which will provide the framework for the signing by medical practitioners and midwives of a certificate of stillbirth or a medical certificate of cause of death. This rule will be subject to negative resolution and will come into operation on the 23rd of March 2026. At our meeting on the 25th of February, the committee was briefed on the SR by the Registrar General, and members agreed that we were content to support the statutory rule. At that time, the Minister had requested the committee expedite its deliberations on the SL1 in order to avoid a further extension to the temporary provisions of the under the Coronavirus Act 2020, and to bring it into effect, i.e. the provisions of the new Act, as quickly as possible. A copy of the Minister's letter can be found at page 77. The Department has stated that there have been no changes to the policy content since SL1 stage. Clerk's cover note can be found at page 69, and full details of the rule can be found at page, and associated information can be found at page 66. Examiner's statutory rules has not drawn anything to the attention of the Assembly. So, members, I'm going to put the question: are we content with the statutory rule? And can I put the question that the Committee for Finance has considered SR 30/2026, the Deaths, Stillbirths, Signing of Certificates, Regulations Northern Ireland 2026, and has no objections to the rule, given we scrutinised this bill not so long ago and we were pleased to have got it onto the statute book. Are we content? Content. Good. Okay. Now we're going to go to the agenda item 8, which is Death, Stillbirths and Baby Loss 2026 Commencement Order, as I said. That's at page 93 of the meeting pack, where there's correspondence from the Department indicating it has made its commencement order following royal assent for the Death, Stillbirths and Baby Loss Act Northern Ireland 2026. This simply brings certain provisions of the bill into force. It is not required to be laid, and we're just giving it to you for noting. Now, members, in relation to baby loss certificates, the DALO has indicated that the Registrar is working at pace to ensure that the required policies and technical infrastructure are in place to make the baby loss certificate scheme operational once the regulations are agreed by the Assembly. It is their intention to provide the draft regulations to the committee prior to the Easter recess, so that will be by next week, I presume. These will take the form of an SL1 letter from the Department. So, members, are we agreed to place consideration of these regulations on the agenda for next week's meeting, assuming we get everything from the Department in time for next week? Yes? Right, okay. Agenda item 9 is the draft Fiscal Council Bill, final consideration of our report. Members, the draft report is at page 98 of the meeting pack. A copy of the bill is at page 153 of the meeting pack. Excuse me. Clause by clause table for the bill is at page 181. Hansard transcript is at page of the clause by clause is at page 50 of the table pack. Members, the draft committee report has been amended since last week's meeting to include comments made during the deliberations. The clerk can give us further on that if we need to as we go along, I suppose. There's
not a huge amount has changed. It's just really putting in some of the further discussion there was last week around suggested amendments that the committee decided not to pursue, and a couple of other small details, but essentially not a lot changed.
Okay, so now, members, are we agreed that Hansard will record this session for us? Thank you. Agreed. Okay, so now, members, you've been provided with a draft copy of the report on the Fiscal Council Bill. Any typographical or spelling errors or whatever will be dealt with in the final proofing stage before it's published. Members, have you any changes to the draft report. I have one very small change myself. Does anybody else have a change? Steve Aiken?
Oh, just apologies, Chair, for being late. Sorry. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for your apologies. So I'm just going to a very small amendment from me, which is a suggested one, which is at, I think could make it clearer at, so in the executive summary section, paragraph 14, expanding its remit. So where it says expanding its remit, it could just be made clear that it's the department. This is the department. We are at page 14 saying this is the department's view. I think because it starts by saying the department, but then it's just the department's view is that expanding its remit may be reconsidered. I just think it would be helpful to make clear that that's the department's view. Does anybody else have any other amendment they wish to make?
Sorry, say that again. Paragraph 14. Where exactly?
Paragraph 14, which is in the executive summary.
Yeah, I've got it
Way
here.
down
The
from the
second
word
paragraph.
expanding, yeah, so preface.
So it says the department confirmed the primary powers of the bill are so this is us basically recounting what the department said about its core role, and then says second sentence, expanding its remit may be reconsidered if the executive gains further tax powers, but for now forecasting is handled by other bodies, making such an expansion unnecessary. I just think in that second sentence we could say the department. So we're just literally just making clear that we are recounting the department's view here.
Like the previous sentence, yeah.
Just the previous sentence.
Okay, no, just to be clear, thanks.
I'm not 100% sure that they did say forecasting is handled by other bodies, but there is forecasting by other bodies, so I'm happy enough to be.
They did.
Okay, that's fine. But I have no other amends at this stage. I think the report is good. Does anybody else have anything else they wish to reflect or add into the?
Excellent.
No. Okay. And I think we do reflect. So hang on. Sorry. Sorry. Excuse me, everyone. Not good. Yes.
Yes, we do. And then at the end again, Chair, there's a number of references.
To the updates we got.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. So those are specifically laid out in minutes and departmental correspondence.
So we
haven't reproduced them in the main body.
I just think it's important that we are, in a sense, clear in the report the additionality that we add in terms of our scrutiny and the additional bits, and we can make that clear in my remarks. What our understanding of the additional bits that are added into the explanatory and financial memorandum mean, i.e., that we, in terms of us being informed of things. We're content. Okay, are there any other additions or clarifications people want? Okay, so members, if I'm correct. So members, subject to those small amendments, I'm going to go through the clause by clause, it's paragraph by paragraph. So I'm going to go, so I'll refer members first of all to the title page, contents page, powers and membership, and list of abbreviations and acronyms. And I'm put the question, are members content the title page, contents page, committee powers and membership pages stand part of the report? Content?
Thank you.
Executive summary, paragraphs 1 to 15, are members content that the executive summary stand part of the report? Content? 16 to 19, are members content the introduction section at paragraph 16 to 19 stand part of the report? Content? Committee approach at paragraphs 20 to 32, are members content that the committee approach at paragraphs 20 to 32 stand part of the report? Are members, so consideration of the bill section 33 to 48, are members content that consideration of the bill section paragraphs 33 to 48 stand part of the report? Content? Clause by clause consideration in paragraph 49 to 188, are we content that stand part of the report? Clause by clause scrutiny of the bill is 189 to 205. Are members content that clause by clause consideration section at 189 paragraphs 189 to 205 stand part of the report? Content? So members, we're going to go to the appendices. At the appendices section of the report is page 151. These will be updated with today's minutes of proceedings and other minutes of evidence, which would include the things we discussed about around the explanatory and financial memorandum and how these have been meaningfully and substantively changed following the committee scrutiny and the committee stage, so that we can be clear where our scrutiny has what the additionality and what the additional understandings and meanings are. So members content that the appendices stand part of the report?
Great. Thank you.
So I'm going to finally put the question, subject to the small amends that we've discussed today, that the report on the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council Bill be the 10th report of the Committee for Finance. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. So subject to the small changes, we will not. That'll now be laid in the Business Office, and obviously it'll be formatted, published on the committee website, and copied to the Minister for Finance if members are agreed ahead of consideration stage. Okay. So now agenda item 10 is consideration of evidence from other statutory committees in the draft budget, which is page 273 of the meeting pack. We have a response from the Communities Committee regarding its scrutiny of the budget 26, 29, 30 and issues relating to the Department's 25-26 budget position and management. Members will recall last week's consideration of similar returns from other committees. This committee would normally be expected to produce a compilation report on the budget, potentially with a plenary debate at the same time as publication. So members, it is for us to decide and discuss whether we publish such a report and have a debate. But first of all, we do have a draft. There's a pen being the clerk team is working on a draft report as they would normally do in any budget. So are members content that the response from the Communities Committee goes into that report, first of all? Yes?
Yeah.
Great. Now, the clerk's going to update us on the way forward for the report.
So, Chair, as you say, we do this as an annual exercise where we seek views of other committees on the budget for the incoming financial year. As that is currently a draft that hasn't been agreed by the executive, it has been more complex and it has taken more time for committees to come back. We still have 3 committees that haven't come back to us. As you say, the report is already being drafted. We have it pretty much up to date. Tom has done a wonderful piece of work on that. So we will be in a position to look to clear a report next week if members are minded to go ahead and do that, even if we don't get the 3 additional inputs, or we can seek to get a timescale from those 3 committees when they might be able to input or if they're going to input. And then members agree a report after that, which would mean probably after Easter. As the Chair says, that usually the basis of a plenary debate has been each of the chairs reflecting on the input from their committee. Some of those are more fulsome than others. Some reflect the difficulty that there has been if a particular minister hasn't agreed a budget, and where officials have not necessarily been willing to commit to things that they don't know are completely pinned down. So it'll really be a case of members deciding what they want to do, and whether it still remains timely if an executive budget is agreed in the meantime that is substantially different from the draft on which the report is based.
I personally think it's a bit surreal to have a plenary debate on a budget which is not agreed, and we don't know whether it's going to be agreed or agreed in that format. But I do want us to obviously lay a report and the public to know that we have scrutinised the draft budget as it is. But I think there's a degree, it's ever so slightly surreal to be having a plenary debate on a budget which we don't know if will be signed off. But anyway, Steve Aiken.
Just a quick one. I think we've gone through this process before some time ago. So actually us saying out this is a draft from the committee and this is what was scrutinised so far, I think is an avenue we could take, because we make it very clear it's a draft one. We've done it before.
As in the report is draft or the budget is draft?
The budget is draft. Yeah. This is the report we've done so far. It shows we've done our work of scrutiny as it is, so it gives a baseline. We've done it before.
Any other members to come in?
Deputy Chair.
Would we then be doing a second version of the same whenever the multi-year budget would be agreed and allocations made, because there's potential that could be significantly different to those that have already been put forward in this draft with all the scrutiny with the committees? Because actually it would be quite an interesting debate where you had different committee representatives across the House actually talking about how it moved in between and what the priorities actually were. So I didn't really know what the process was, because same as the chair, the work's been done, appreciate that. It'd be good to get this report laid, but would there be another mini report, or if we were to lay a motion, could it be reflective of this report plus then what had been announced, and maybe that movement, the motion being in and around something like that? I think it would be, when we come back after Easter, that would be probably where we would be at, and it would be good if the committee led that conversation.
Just to clarify, you're saying lay this report as it sort of if once we agree it in draft, obviously, which we haven't actually agreed a draft report yet, but once a report is agreed, that we would lay it but then not have the debate until after Easter. Well, obviously we can't have the debate until after Easter.
Well, I was going to say, if we had a debate, is there scope in the wording of the motion to allow it that we'll probably be in a position where we would have this report on all of this, whereas we would know the new allocations and something would be coming forward, everybody would be scrutinising that, and you'd be talking about the movements?
From memory, I think the text of the motion is you're not necessarily committing to endorsing the budget. The committee is noting that it has published its report to give people the opportunity to give their view.
Yeah, it's essentially a platform for debate. Chair,
Steve Aiken wished to
very
come in,
quick one. I think the last time we did this, we made the provision if it changed substantially, we would bring it back, and it didn't change substantially. So that's just. But I knew it was a yearly budget, it wasn't a 3-year budget. But I just thought that might be the wording we could stick in.
No, it was just on. I mean, I'm flexible in terms of allowing the other committees or to see if there's a timeline that they can come back, but is it likely that they're going to, or do we know?
We know at least one of them had a substantial briefing on the budget, and we would anticipate a response from them. So I would still be hopeful we would get some more in, and I can talk again to those clerks involved. Chair, I suppose that the precedent there is for this is there was a draft multi-year budget brought by the Finance Minister in 2021.
Yeah.
And it was drafted. It wasn't executive agreed. The committee, the Finance Then committee, did a report on it and published that report.
We did have a debate on it.
And then there was a debate as well. So, any of these things are possible. So the report is substantially written, and obviously we've been seeking to bring it in front of the committee because that was the committee's stated intention. In terms of a motion, it might be a case of waiting to see what happens over the Easter period. As the Finance Minister has already highlighted to the committee, last year's budget wasn't agreed until the beginning of April by the executive. So there is still scope for that to happen, obviously before the vote on account 45% runs out in the summer. So the committee can do any of those things, but we will have a finished report fairly soon, and we could have the debate fairly close after Easter, depending on what we know or don't know at that stage.
Okay, so it says our members broadly content with the idea that we schedule we go ahead with scheduling a 2-note debate on a currently draft report on a currently draft budget. Members content with that? Yeah. Happy enough? Okay, I'm done. I'm trying to.
Hypothetical there, Chair. Yes.
I don't want to be accused of having a leaning in any particular direction. Of course, I'm.
Do we write to the 3 outstanding committees then and ask if they're likely?
Talk to them as well. Probably easiest just to communicate directly to see what's going to happen, whether they've got briefing scheduled. I know, as I say, one has had it, and we're assuming a response is in the pipeline, but we just need to pin that one down. The other 2 have more complex situations. Okay. If I put it that way, Chair.
Okay, agenda item 11. If members are content with those, then we will we'll hear back next week in terms of both committee responses and potential scheduling of a debate. Agenda item 11 is performance and culture of the NI Civil Service. That's at page 54 of the tabled pack. There are draft citizen space questions for inquiry. Questions are split into 2 sections for civil servants and non-civil servants. Areas covered include NIC structures in the senior civil service capacity and capability, recruitment, retention and staffing challenges, HR practices, sickness, absence and hybrid working, NIC's people strategy 25 to 30, culture, wellbeing and inclusivity, policy and systemic improvements. Some open-ended questions have also been included, which obviously to give people the opportunity to say things which may be relevant but haven't been specifically asked for in previous questions. So members, you see the questions there, which are at pages 54 onwards in the tabled pack. Does anybody have anything they would wish to add, Deputy Chair?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team. The questions are really good, but I just want to flag my significant concern at this point, having come through this recently with PAC. If you were to get, a lot of responses to this, the level of work and effort with a high volume of text boxes here, I'm really, really concerned with it, because you have to actually, capture the essence of all of those and do something with them. And I think there's nearly over half of those questions are text boxes. So obviously you can't anticipate it, but I don't know, in terms of timing and resourcing, like we put out the Access to GP report from PAC, and we got over 15,000 responses, and it took sort of 6 months to work through all of that, because you were trying to grasp the text, the keywords, and you know, all of the things that came with that. We looked into it at the time. The AI wasn't developed enough, you know, to feed into that and things. So I think whenever you're actually asking things that are fairly concise there, I don't know if it can be a bit more, you know, options or scaled with a text box at the end of every section to kind of cover all of those things. It's just there's a lot of text box answers there, and I'm just concerned as to then how you conclude in those sections and how that's pulled together. So I just want to flag that. I think they're all really, really good questions and good thought-provoking
Well, I suppose
things,
one way of doing it would simply be to, you know, you could have a
multiple choice or slide and scale and then a text box at the end.
Yeah, potentially in a text box. Is there anything else that you
add?
Is there anything? Are there anything else? On the open-ended questions, I mean, or the other thing is we have a section which are kind of open, which are all kind of open-ended. So we could kind of call that potentially, and I don't think we would necessarily. If you have a question which is there anything else regarding the culture or you know, basically a broad enough question that anything someone really wants to get off their chest, they will have a space to write it. But it's not like, you know, the person who's like, what's the most significant improvement Nick could make? And these are all excellent questions, and thank you to the team for working on them. What example of good practice have you experienced? Then the person who is prolix, as someone who's sometimes like that myself, you know, you're kind of incentivizing them to go in and give long. When it may well be that if you focus them into getting the one big thing off their chest, or the 3 or 4 big things off their chest in one answer. I'll bring in others. Anyone else have any comments on this? Brian Kingston.
Yeah, well, I actually think it is important that there is scope for them to come up with ideas and suggestions. Otherwise, it becomes just like an opinion survey.
The point is that if you have one text box, which is giving them the option of 1 or 2.
Right, but I do think we have to provide for people to come up with actual proposals. I mean, I would like to see a question towards the end about, you know, would you have proposals for savings from efficiency measures or potential removal or addressing potential duplication of services? You know, I think we do have to encourage people to come forward with actual proposals from people inside who can see where there could be efficiencies, or if they feel there's duplication, there might be no ideas come forward. But I think you have to give, it's not just to have a statistical response.
I would just say, Brian, to be very cautious here, like efficiency in public service is really important. We aren't this is a broad thing that we look at all the time, efficiency, but this inquiry is specifically about, you know, kind of capacity, capability, cultural issues, rather than, you know, so for example, I would be worried about a thing where we're kind of saying to civil servants, give us effectively a policy recommendation or a thing that could be, do you know, I think that's kind of asking them to stray into slightly other territory. However, I take the point that we do want to incentivise them to make proposals. I think you can do that with 1 or 2 boxes. I kind of take Diane's point that you can probably do that with 1 or 2 text boxes at the end, which are framed in a way. So can I suggest that we rationalise it a bit? We have a section, so section 8, for example, 7 and 8, well, are all text boxes basically, and I think they could, at a bare minimum, have one open-ended or one slightly open-ended question each, and then maybe. And you know what you could even think about doing, I suppose, is look at all the other sections where it's sort of, you know, on the capacity and capability.
Move the text boxes to 1 at the end.
We'll move the text box to 1 at the end, which are like, are there any specific points on any of the? Are there any additional points on any of the above sections that are that you haven't been able to cover yet, or that you would like to outline, and then almost make it kind of an unlimited, if you can do this, like give people maximum space rather than have it like 500, you have like 10 questions where you have 500 words each. You basically have one. I think you're more likely to get
character limit.
It's character.
We can do a character limit.
Can you do like a very like an almost unlimited character? Because
you can do it anyway.
Strangely, I kind of think, I don't know what others think. I mean, you will always get somebody who wants to just like, I've been working on this project for 30 years, and here have my 12 megabit file that I've been working on.
Those people do have the other. So it's probably useful to flag that the Citizen Space Survey is also parallel to the Call for Evidence. Call for Evidence is already opened. As you'll see from the next item, we have been receiving things already. So those who have made this into an important part of their lives have already started sending us things and already got in contact. We've been contacted by both the significant unions. So I take the Deputy Chair's point, because if we push this out through the unions, then you are looking at potentially a lot of responses, and then we do need to think.
Like a note at the front of it that if you have a further submission you want to do. You can
Yes, that's good. That's good. So can I suggest that? Okay. So we rationalise I think that's. So if we rationalise the question, so are people content that? I think there's the right subsections. So we've got they align to what we've talked about from one beginning, next structures and senior civil service, 2 capacity capability. Then we have 3, 4, 5, 6, all of which are sliding scale questions followed by text boxes. That rather than have a text box question at the end of that, rather than one open-ended text box with I don't know how many potential 500 or 1,000 characters in each, you could say we will have one big text box at the end saying on any of the headings above, is there anything you wish on one or more of the headings you can add anything, and I think that might force the person who has a particular additional thing on their mind to say, right, it's this, rather than I'm going to sit and do an essay now on something that I wouldn't. Right, and then
we link the two then.
And then I think on open-ended questions we could consolidate those two. To be honest, people are content with that. But I don't think I'm preventing anybody from saying anything. Like they can still, Steve.
Quick observations. One, are we putting on this as confidential? Because a lot of civil servants will be quite twitched about putting on something that
you put the option for anonymising at the start.
You have that option there where they can anonymise. Part of our problem always has been with inquiries that if we publish, we've always published things in full. Now I appreciate with Citizen Space we've entered into a whole new world of redaction where we'd obviously redact personal information. So the options will be there, and we automatically close down the automatic publishing option, so we don't do that. My practice has been, and I've therefore made it the team's practice, is we don't publish until we've literally taken everything, gone through it, redacted, and only then will be published. And we don't publish on Citizen Space, we publish on our own website.
Just to read out the consent question, so everyone's aware of it. It's, do you consent to your submission being published on the committee's website and then included in the committee's report? And the two possible answers that they have to answer is yes, publish in full, or yes, publish, but with my personal information and any content that could be used to identify me redacted.
Okay, that's brilliant. You just swap those two questions around.
We'll automatically do that anyway.
That's the answers, 2 answers for questions. It's up to the.
Are those set phrase answers, Tom? Because those are good. You can't sort of say.
We're told what to put in.
You can't just say yes, but I want to be anonymous.
We try and do a format that then becomes familiar across all committees. However, it is our practice to remove the personal information anyway, whether they say yes or not.
You don't want a chill factor.
Our other policy thing.
On that question, the Assembly's privacy notice is also linked.
Okay.
So,
and the second
just
one,
been updated as well.
The second one was for looking at the data. Can we get Reyes to do the work for us?
Did I laugh? We probably find that they are already burdened with their own work.
I know they just got somebody new for
this kind of thing. I don't think that resource is necessarily freely available to us for this, because they probably would be
it's just that there's lots of text boxes. They got some Gucci stuff to pull stuff out.
I think it's just simply the way they work. We will cull a lot of what might add to the burden, and also
perhaps Chair even discuss with some of their clerks some of their surveys and how they handle them. It's just I just lived that experience through the PAC, so I just
that one has become a bit of a cause célèbre amongst clerks as well. Okay. So we have all been warned on that one. Did you Brian?
Okay, Brian. Yes.
Well, just to see where we are in the text boxes. I mean, I do see value in having a text box in each section. Because after you've answered a few questions on that theme.
I think that is what he's saying, one text box at the end of each section.
Is that right? Or are you talking about just one
text box at the end, which says like on all of these. So,
I mean, 10 text questions in a row there at one point.
I know, I get the idea of not having lots of text boxes, so you take like people, NHS, people strategy, you have a couple of questions, then you have what gaps do you see? I just think if you leave it to the very end, whatever thoughts people have stimulated by doing the questions, they'll forget about it. I'm more interested in getting a quality of response.
Okay. Yes. I think this should not be an insoluble problem.
We'll bring back.
Like the card seem to find a way which is rationalised and which we can agree on. Okay. I don't think we don't necessarily need to detain ourselves with precisely about where the. But yeah, I think it would be helpful to have fewer text boxes, and not that we want less information, but we don't want to incentivise people to just create extra, like additional text where they could be more concise and still make the same points. So, okay, the clerks will come back with a proposal.
My main thought is that if you just have statistical data, then everybody can draw their own conclusions from it. At least you're asking people to tell us what they think directly.
I will test now members that they all go through and read all the text responses and not just leave it. Because if we're asking for these people to write these texts, then we should all be willing to go and read it ourselves.
We can do some things with trained AI around common words that pop up. It's just part of the problem we have is we don't have our own. Let me get this right. Internal
AI systems.
AI that has been trained.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the whole issue, is we don't have our own trained AI. That's what means we aren't able to do this in the way we would like to, in an entirely closed internal way.
And I think it is important to have, if we're capturing this data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, it's really important for us that we're able to say to people whose information we're asking for that there will be a meaningful engagement with the information they send us. So I think that's why limiting the text boxes, and I think it was a good suggestion, means that it's about optimizing our ability to say we've actually gone through it. And a remarkable number of people have said, that they think the HR process is too clunky or something. I don't know. That's off the top of my head. It could be any other observation, and that's a new insight that we have. Okay, but if we're happy enough, the clerks will come back with a proposal that's rationalised. Right. Agenda item 12 is. Sorry, it's not. Agenda item 12 is agenda item 11.
No.
It is agenda item 12. Apologies.
It is 12.
But before we do that, I've got a couple of additional. So we are agreed that the questions they're going to be rationalised first, and then we'll agree to publish them ideally next week. Now, members, are we agreed to share the citizen space survey with NIPSA and the FDA? Maybe also, I don't know if there are any members of Prospect here or in PCS.
They haven't approached. I don't think so. But
I just think it might be able to send IC too, like if there's anybody else.
Because we know who are the local representatives, so we've had proactive approaches from FDA and NIPSA.
Yeah, I know they've obviously.
Others, I'm not aware.
It's worth saying.
Nick 2 will
be able to tell us. Does anybody else have is there anybody else? Yeah, because there might be other unions that I think would have a legitimate, like Unison, for example. The Royal Colleges will have very direct engagement with the Northern Civil Service, and they may have people who move in and out of it. So I think if they want to give us their views, I think that would be useful, and in a sense they will be. Okay. There may be other organisations who may want to correspond with in terms of call for evidence. I can think of some think tanks, but we're talking about citizen space today, so we can probably that will probably suffice for now. So members, page 62 of the table pack, there's an email sent to the committee regarding FOI evidence on, this is a related matter, we're covering it now. This is an individual who's emailed us relating to grade 6 temporary promotions and recruitment efficiency. So the clerk wanted to suggest something.
Chair, this is actually relevant to the inquiry because it's basically commenting on the extensive use of temporary promotions. So it's one of those questions of, is that because these are not permanent vacancies? That would suggest that what's being used is there's a merit list from a board, from a competition. And what happens with a temporary promotion is internal candidates on that merit list would be taken and put into the temporary promotions, because the temporary promotion wouldn't be offered to an external candidate because they've applied for a permanent job. So it may be used to temporarily fill jobs that are being held open on a longer term to save money. But it's those kind of questions that this will raise. So if members are content, it was sent to us as evidence for the inquiry, and if members are content, we can fold it into the inquiry, because it just kind of goes with the data we've got around the high level of temporary promotions that are over a lengthy period. Okay,
members are content with that? Yeah, okay. So agenda item 12 is correspondence. 12.1 and 12.2 are Hansard transcripts of recent oral evidence sessions, one on rating policy, the other on the AFP bill. Members are content they'll be published. Then we're going to go to the table pack. 12.3 is Hansard transcript of the AFP bill, the committee report session which we had last week. So members, that's to note. People agree to that. 12.4 is the 60th report of the examiner statutory rules. There's nothing for us, just for noting. Agenda item 13 is draft forward work programme. So yeah, okay. Yeah. Clark's going to give us
a huge amount to outline on that, Chair. Members will be excited to know we do have oral briefings next week. We've had 2 weeks without, and it does seem strange. To explain that, we had anticipated more work needing to still be done around the bill report, so we had put in time just as a rationale for that. So next week we have oral briefings from the Department on the People Strategy and on the outturn as well. So People Strategy is part of our inquiry, and that will lead on then to hopefully getting oral briefing from the relevant officials in the South who are halfway through their People Strategy period. So it's kind of, the NICS is at the start, they're halfway through, they're 5 years along. Then we have our external visit to Goodwood House to look at aspects of Integrate, and that's the 22nd of April. So we'll send out just a bit of further timetabling around that. So it's not the first week back, it's the second week back after the Easter recess. Those are the two, really, just Chair, I wanted to flag.
Okay, are we expecting to hear any more from obviously we'll be in the new financial year by the time we come back, to get more from the department, basically, I suppose, we await a budget being agreed?
We have an open set of briefing, and we have officials coming in on the 15th anyway, the first week back, so they'll be able to update us how far along we are. We have the Minister in for the 6th of June because we anticipated by that stage something will have been decided. So it seemed logical then to sort of bring him in a bit later, sorry, the 3rd of June. But we have the officials in the first meeting back. They can update on anything new and anything we haven't kind of cleared up before we go to the Easter recess. So they're aware that that's very much the purpose of that briefing.
Okay, and just remember, will we get outturn data final? When do we get final
outturns? June, April. We have an oral briefing scheduled.
For full 25-26 outturn.
Yeah.
And that's
Final outturn.
And that is what we're scheduled for June.
We have that scheduled for June.
Do we know when they'll send it to us? Or do we know when the publication?
That will be around that time. Okay. We don't get site very long before that's published. So that's just prior to the
You have a
accounts
period
and so
12
on.
and a period 13, so you'll get a provisional March.
So we will do. We'll
then
still get those.
Yeah.
Still get those chairs. So the final, the absolute final, will be June, just before the accounts are.
We get a monthly outturn before that.
We get a monthly outturn we get that every month anyway. We'll still get those, but we tend to do an oral briefing for the final outturn because that is absolutely everything pinned down, or as pinned down as it can be at that stage.
Do we know? I'm just wondering if we should be asking about, given the capital position, if we should be asking if they're confident around getting all the capital out the door, given the scale of final capital.
Well, we can ask if officials have a much. Well, where are we now? We're the 18th.
Because today, just thinking about the scale of the capital underspend, and I wonder if members it would be helpful for us to get a kind of final update from the department for next week, just so we know where things are, and so that we can get we can look at that. So, because I think it would be helpful to know that if members can tell us for that where things are with capital just in the last few weeks the less than fortnight of the financial year. Okay. Grand. Now, the next agenda item is, actually done all that, is AOB, sorry, agenda. Are we content that we'll publish the forward work programme? Yep. So, agenda 14 is any other business? Does anyone have any other business that they want to raise? Yes, apology, I'll do that now. Yes, of course, yes. Members, are we content that the meeting pack will be issued on the 5th, the 13th, Monday the 13th, when we're back for the 15th of April session? We assume staff will be on leave, and I hope other people and their own staff have some leave as well planned. So we're content with that? Yep. So we'll be grand. Okay, now 14 is any other business? Anyone have any other business? It's a relatively prompt meeting today.
Harry was at the event on Saturday.
Harry, yes, we've drawn update us now.
Yeah, no, it was very good. Ladies were lovely. It was nice just to see. It was a bit strange to start, didn't know what was going on, but they put out lovely scarves.
Labyrinth.
The labyrinths, and sort of telling us that the scarves meant something, that as a gift to somebody, that's like putting a warmth and like giving somebody a hug, literally. So it was a nice touch. And then upstairs for a cup of tea and some sandwiches, which was nice to get a wee chat with them. And it was really good. It was really worthwhile, and I was glad I attended on behalf of the committee. So and appreciated
Harry.
it, so no problem.
That was a
Thank
really
you.
good event. And obviously, it's been really touching to engage with the group and others affected. Okay, so members, agenda item 15 is date, time, and place of next meeting. The next meeting is here, Wednesday, 25th of March at 2 p.m. Obviously, lots of bits to follow up on before the end of the financial year. That's our last session before recess and the end of the financial year. So obviously, I hope we're all here and we can close a few things off. I'll just put the question now. The committee is now adjourned. The committee is adjourned. The committee is now adjourned. Okay.
Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Sound. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed. 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 Senate Chamber. Signed.